Well, welcome to the 700 Club. New coronavirus cases are surging across the United States, along with a sharp spike in deaths. What new evidence have doctors discovered about the virus? And what do we now know about its effect on people's hearts? George Thomas has that.
The U.S., currently the hardest-hit nation in the world with coronavirus, is facing unprecedented infection spikes.
17 states now recording high number of cases, 15 with record high hospitalizations, 7 with record number of deaths. Florida witnessing its highest one-day total for any state ever, 15,300.
We definitely had a sharp increase in the number of people going to the hospital. Number of people are in ICU and the number of people on our ventilators.
The virus has claimed 134,572 lives in the United States as of Sunday, with health experts warning the death rate likely to continue climbing.
I think things are getting so bad or are so bad, they may need to go back to a shelter-in-place order.
This as school district leaders across the country considering plans for the upcoming school year and whether students will return to the classroom. The CDC says full reopening carries the highest risk. Guidelines recommend keeping desks 6 feet apart, students wearing face coverings, and closing communal areas like playgrounds and dining areas. The White House pushing hard for schools to reopen.
It's more a matter of their health and well-being that they be back in school. And we've seen this in other countries in Europe and elsewhere in the world, where students have gone back to school and have done so very successfully.
Still, some experts sounding caution on mandating that schools reopen, especially with infection rates continuing to spike.
What's less clear is how efficiently kids will spread the virus in school, both to each other and to teachers, adults, and parents.
Meanwhile, in Arizona, where cases are exploding, researchers there discovering a strain that appears to make the virus more infectious.
And this particular mutation allows it to infect human cells much easier.
This as studies continue to show that COVID-19 not only makes existing heart problems worse, but causes new ones with symptoms lingering long after recovery. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. CBN medical reporter Laurie Johnston joins us now for more on these developments. Laurie, how has this thing mutated? What are the impacts now?
Well, Pat, researchers in Arizona looked at 1,400 samples from COVID-19 patients, recent samples, and 90% of them had this mutation that George was talking about that makes the virus more easier to spread, more contagious. And it's because you've seen those little spikes on the outside of the coronavirus. It makes them, that's how the virus penetrates our cells and then replicates. And it looks like the mutation is in those spikes. And so this needs to be studied further, but that could explain, and many researchers are saying that could explain why we're seeing such an explosion, at least in Arizona and perhaps elsewhere. But the good news, Pat, is that it also appears this mutation might make the virus less deadly. Let me repeat that. This mutation might make the virus less deadly. Also, something that scientists are going to look into and further study. But there is that hypothesis, because we have seen in Arizona the death rate go down. Of course, we've seen increased testing, and that could attribute to the lower death rate. But it could be that this particular mutation is now making this COVID-19 coronavirus more like the other coronaviruses that we've seen associated with the common cold. Remember, there are 7 coronaviruses that we know about in humans. 4 of them are associated with the common cold, and they are very widespread, but not that deadly. The other 2, SARS and MERS, are less widespread, but deadlier.
What about the impact on the heart of this COVID?
So now we know we're talking about the long term. There's some question about the long term, perhaps even permanent heart damage that COVID-19 could cause. We know that people who have heart issues are twice at risk of dying from COVID-19 than people who don't have heart problems. But there are now some reports of people who had COVID-19, have recovered and are having heart problems, cardiomyopathy. That's when the heart has difficulty pumping blood to the rest of the body. So there are calls now to study post-COVID-19 cardiac syndrome. We know a doctor in New York City, she had mild symptoms of COVID-19. She's since recovered, but now she's having difficulty breathing and catching her breath, and her heart is racing. She went in and got checked, and she has cardiomyopathy. She didn't have it before. And so, again, we're seeing we need a lot more research about the long-term impacts of COVID-19. There's reason to believe that there could be some neurological long-term impacts, and we've seen from autopsies, Pat, that there is damage in many cases to the liver, kidneys, and lungs, but we haven't seen that damage to the heart yet there. So this does need further study.
What about a vaccine? Are we any closer?
A lot closer. So there are many vaccine candidates, and it looks like they're going to be going into these large studies of hundreds of thousands of people. And if these studies turn out to be good, if it shows that the virus works and is safe, then it could be available to people in the United States by the end of this year. Some of the leading contenders are already starting to mass produce the vaccine right now so that if and when it's approved, it is ready to go. The military might be involved in getting it out to all the doctors' offices and the most needy people at first.
Good news. Lori, thank you so much. Come back soon.
My pleasure. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Well, in other news, Turkey's dictator steps up his power quest for domination. His latest move has angered the world and offended certainly the Orthodox Christians and many other Christians around the world. John Jessup has more on that story.
Thanks, Pat. Turkish President Recep Erdogan says the famed Hagia Sophia will open for Muslim prayers next Friday, July 24th, right after he approved turning the UN World Heritage Site into a mosque. The move is another sign of Erdogan's determination to expand his influence in the Muslim world. As CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, some fear it also raises the threat to Israel, the Middle East, and even NATO.
Moments after President Erdogan's controversial decision, the Muslim call to prayer sounded from Hagia Sophia. Erdogan made his decision despite objections from the U.S., Russia, UN, and the Russian and Greek Orthodox churches. Hagia Sophia was once the seat of the Eastern Orthodox Church.
The church was built in the 6th century and was devoted to Christ, the Savior. For us, it has been and will always remain the church devoted to Christ.
Once the largest church in Christendom, the Hagia Sophia is a coveted symbol. It was first converted into a mosque well over 500 years ago during the Islamic Ottoman Empire, then turned into a museum by Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern-day Turkey.
The 1934 decision to turn Hagia Sophia into a museum was a way of signaling that Turkey was moving from the Ottoman era of sectarianism and hierarchies to a secular republic of equal citizens. And now with this move, Erdogan is once again asserting Islamist supremacism and domination on Turkey's ethnic and religious minorities.
But Erdogan's vision has always been more ambitious than controlling his country. In a Facebook post, he said, the revival of the Hagia Sophia is a sign towards the return of freedom to the Al-Aqsa Mosque here in Jerusalem. In the Arabic Facebook post, he also said the resurrection of Hagia Sophia is a greeting from our heart to all cities from Bukhara to Andalusia. Andalusia is modern-day Spain, and Bukhara is in modern-day Uzbekistan. Both are references to the Islamic dream of reclaiming lands once under the rule of Islam. And it all begins with Turkey.
This is just one among many steps he has taken and will continue to take to socially engineer Turkey into a majoritarian, authoritarian, and sectarian regime. And this will have consequences, repercussions beyond Turkey.
It's also a red flag to Turkey's Christians.
This, of course, is going to be disastrous for Turkey's dwindling Christian population. Overall, there seems to be an intimidation campaign to either scare away Turkey's Christians on the one hand and to reimpose a sectarian Sunni Muslim dominant ideology on the other.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, Erdogan's move causing a lot of controversy.
Worse than controversy. I said on this program many times, he is a thug. He is an absolute dictator. He has engineered a plot against him, which really was a phony thing, and then he used it to suppress. He suppressed the military. He suppressed the civilian population. He has done everything he can to become a vicious dictator. And now he's talking about from Andalusia, from Spain all the way to Uzbekistan, that entire swath of land he wants to claim as a Muslim caliphate, and with him as the caliph. I mean, it's dangerous, and yet on the log, he has talked to the president over and over and over again. He came here at the invitation of the President of the United States, who hailed him as a nice man and a good Democrat and all the rest of it. I mean, he is a monster, absolute monster. Make no mistake about it. He wants to Islamicize the entire world, and he'd like to be in charge of it. So when President Trump is being challenged, and he will be challenged in this next term by the North Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese, but believe me, it's going to be the Turks. And if you look at the book of Revelation, all of that took place in what is now Turkey. Turkey was the center of Christianity in the early days. The churches of Asia, for example, in Revelation, are all located in what would be called Turkey. And it is a key spot. And this man has come up. Well, you know, I was in favor of the Kurds. The Kurds were standing against Erdogan, but we abandoned the Kurds and left them to his mercy, and his mercy has not been too kind to them. So we're looking at a threat. Just keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, before it's over, President Trump, I believe on a law and order basis, is going to wind up being reelected. As president, he's going to be challenged by the Chinese. They're going to the South China Sea. They're going to do everything they can to make hegemony of the Chinese. Then he's going to be challenged by the North Koreans, who are busily engaged in getting missiles and launch facilities to hit the United States of America with nuclear weapons. Now you're looking not only at the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans, you're looking at a revived Turkey that can be the worst threat of all of it. So we're going to be facing some bitter foes in the next couple of years. And if there's ever a time to pray, this is it. John?
Pat, back here at home, a Navy ship is still smoldering after an explosion ripped through the boat Sunday morning.
Fire was reported in the lower vehicle storage area on board Bonhomme Richard. Ashy fire. There's nothing toxic in there. It's just black smoke, and nowhere now, because we're doing the firefighting agent, you're starting to see more whiter smoke, which is a good sign that the fire is being maintained.
160 sailors were on board at the time of the explosion. 21 people were injured. The flames sending thick smoke into the air of the San Diego Naval Base. Sailors in firefighting gear battled the flames, and tugboats sprayed water onto the assault vessel. Nearby ships had to be moved away from the area. The damage is said to be substantial, and the fire could keep burning for days. No word yet on what caused the explosion. Well, Senator Lindsey Graham says he is ready to call on Robert Mueller to testify before the Judiciary Committee's investigation of the Russia probe. This after Mueller publicly defended his Russia investigation, particularly the conviction of longtime Trump ally Roger Stone. This weekend, Mueller wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post after President Trump commuted Stone's prison sentence. Stone was found guilty of lying to Congress in a case that stemmed from Mueller's investigation. In his op-ed, Mueller wrote that Stone, quote, remains a convicted felon, and rightly so. He also praised the integrity of the men and women who carried out the investigations. Senator Graham's committee is looking into the origins of the Mueller probe and alleged misdeeds by the Justice Department and FBI. Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney is joining Democrats in criticizing the president's Stone commutation, Romney calling it, quote, unprecedented and historic corruption. Well, the family of evangelist Morris CERULLO says he went home to be with the Lord Friday. CERULLO gave his life to Christ at the age of 14 and later became an evangelist to the nations, sharing the gospel in multiple countries around the world where hundreds of thousands attended his meetings. His ministry reported miracles taking place as the power of God swept over people. Thousands gave their lives to Jesus. Thousands more were trained to become evangelists to their own nations. Morris CERULLO is survived by his wife of 68 years, Teresa, and their son and daughter, 7 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. CERULLO was 88 years old. And Pat, after 70 years of ministry, he was also known as God's general.
Well, he was something, and his son David has got a tremendous, he's got the INSP network, and he's got a marvelous ministry. And I understand his mother, he's asked for prayer. She has this COVID infection, really? Teresa, what I believe. So they're asking for prayer. But once again, one of God's generals has been called home. So this happens. People, they do get to their 80s and 90s, and the time comes for somebody else to take their place. But anyhow, Morris CERULLO just finished building a center out in California that would be kind of a memorial to him now, because it was a very expensive situation. I haven't seen it, but I've seen pictures, and it was very, very beautifully done. So anyhow, one more of God's generals has gone to be with the Lord.